I've been writing for years, but recently I came to a slightly uncomfortable conclusion. Wanting to be a great novelist is not the same thing as actually training to become one. I read a lot of books about writing. I save writing advice. I underline things. I watch interviews with authors. And then I sit down in front of my own novel, and somehow I'm still asking the same questions. Why isn't this scene working? Why does this character feel flat? Is the middle boring? Am I actually building suspense? Or am I withholding information and hoping for the best? Clearly, I'm frustrated. So I've decided to stop collecting random writing advice and start studying storytelling properly. So naturally, I built myself a personal curriculum in storytelling. Over the next few months, every other Saturday, I'm going to study one part of it, pull it apart, look at how great stories actually use it, and then test it on the novel I'm writing. And if some famous writing rule makes the story worse, we're throwing it out. Also, I was originally going to start this in September, and then I realized I was literally procrastinating on studying just because September looked nicer on a syllabus. So we're starting in August, mid-August, that is. And I'm also 7 months pregnant and due at the end of October, which has made me think about time a little differently. I have all this excitement to learn and create right now, and I realized, why am I waiting for some arbitrary start date? If I wanted to do this, I might as well start right now. By the end of this video, I will be showing you exactly what I'm studying, how I've built my curriculum, and the one rule I'm giving myself so this doesn't become another pile of beautifully highlighted books that changes nothing about my writing. Hi, I'm Eva Lana. I'm a writer. I write fiction and poetry, and I've been working on one particular novel for years. And this is my personal curriculum. This is not a course I'm selling, and I'm definitely not sitting here pretending that I've somehow figured out the secret to writing a brilliant novel. It's actually almost the opposite. The whole reason I'm doing this is because there is so much I still want to understand. I want to understand why some characters feel almost disturbingly real, and how. Why some stories make you feel anxious even when technically nothing happened yet. Why you can predict one book 50 pages in, while another author can put the answer right in front of you and somehow you still can't see it. Why some scenes stay with us for years. And the question I want us, you and I, to explore together throughout this curriculum is, how do we take all of that knowledge and use it in our own writing? Because even though I built this curriculum around the things I want to learn, I want you to be able to follow along with me too. If you're working on your own story, please join me in this challenge and let's do this together. You can take these lessons, test them on your own writing, and figure out what actually works for you. And you don't need my exact reading list. You can build your own personal curriculum if you want to, or you can follow mine if it's easier for you. Take what you need and ignore what you don't. I believe we're gonna learn a lot, because I've noticed something about the way I've been learning. I have a lot of information. What I don't necessarily have is a system. The internet is incredible if you're a writer. You can learn almost anything, but it also means that we're constantly collecting advice that is out of context. Show, don't tell. Kill your darlings. Outline your novel. Don't outline your novel. Write every day. Don't force yourself to write every day. Cut adverbs. Write the ending first. Follow structure. Forget structure. And after a while, you can know 50 different pieces of writing advice and still not know which one your story actually needs. That's the part I'm interested in. I don't want someone to just tell me, do this. I really want to know why. What problem is this supposed to solve? What happens if I don't do it? Where can I find other writers doing the exact opposite and somehow making it work? And does this advice actually help my story? Because I don't think becoming a better storyteller is about collecting more rules. I think it's about understanding storytelling deeply enough that you know when a rule is useful and when it's not. That's what I want this curriculum to teach me. I considered just making myself a giant reading list. But I know myself. A reading list would very quickly become read book, highlight 70% of book, feel extremely productive, put book back on shelf, and then continue writing writing exactly the way I did before. So this needed to be different. I wanted to build something closer to an actual course. But instead of studying toward a qualification, I'm studying toward a very specific goal. I want to become a better novelist, which means I get to build the curriculum around the gaps in my knowledge. And that's the part I love about calling it a personal curriculum. It can change. If I discover halfway through this that I'm terrible at dialogue, we're studying dialogue. And if I discover that my antagonist has the emotional complexity of a cardboard box, apparently we're studying antagonists. And more importantly, if the book I'm reading contradicts something that I've learned 3 weeks earlier, even better. I don't want one writing guru's system. I want to compare ideas. I want to look at novels, films, literary history, psychology, writers who approach storytelling differently from one another. And then I want to decide what actually belongs in my toolbox. So here's where I'm starting. And this is very intentionally not organized as, here are 12 books I have to finish in 12 weeks. Some of these books might stay with us for several episodes because the goal is not to finish the reading list. The goal is to learn something. Part 1. The Writer. I'm starting with Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. No structure, no plot, no character arcs. The Writer. Because I can learn every storytelling technique in existence. If perfectionism keeps me rewriting the first page instead of finishing the draft, then none of it matters. Lamott's Bird by Bird has endured specifically as a book about navigating the actual writing life and process rather than simply giving a formula about constructing a story. So that's lesson 1. Before we dissect the story, we deal with the person trying to write it. Part 2, the craft. And then I have On Writing by Stephen King. What makes this one interesting to me is that it's not purely a craft manual. It's part memoir, part writing book. So we're not only getting King's advice, but also we're looking at his experiences and habits. And he pumps out a book every now and then, so he knows a thing or two about writing a book. And a really good book at that. And I want to particularly look at reading, language, and revision, and the relationship between being a reader and becoming a writer. Because I sometimes think that writers become so obsessed with learning how to write, Exhibit A, that we forget how much of our education actually happens when we pay attention to what we're reading. Part 3, structure. This is where it starts getting dangerous for my novel. So the first book is The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell. This one's a little different from the others because Campbell wasn't really giving writers a formula for how to structure a novel. He was looking across myths from different cultures and asking why certain patterns seems to appear again and again. And that eventually became what we now call the hero's journey. So before I study modern beat sheets and story systems, I want to understand where some of those ideas came from in the first place. And because we're getting into structure, I have Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody. The original Save the Cat system came from screenwriting, but Brody's version adapts that beat-based approach specifically for novelists and also examines recurring story genres. And then I have The Anatomy of Story by John Truby, which approaches story construction through a much more interconnected system of character, of desire, of weakness, plot, and of course change. The book itself is structured around Truby's 22-step approach to writing a story. And then we have Story by Robert McGee, which is a monster. Yes, I did start just because I had this book longer than I had the other books. I love it. McGee's work focuses heavily on the underlying principles of story, of structure, of substance, and style, rather than treating storytelling as a formula to copy. And I deliberately want several books about structure. Just because I don't want to read one book and suddenly start forcing every single story that I write into that author's system. I want to put them next to each other. Where do they agree? Where do they approach the same problem differently? And then what happens when I take those ideas into my manuscript? Part 4, Character and Emotion. This is where books like The Emotional Thesaurus by Angela Ackerman and Becca, I'm gonna butcher it, I'm sorry in advance, Puglisi, it's very important, and I apologize. It's designed as a reference for portraying emotions through things like physical signals, intense sensations, and thoughts instead of reaching for the same description every time. But I don't want to stop at how does an angry person move. I want to get into why we care about fictional characters through their emotions. Why our deeply flawed characters are more compelling than objectively good characters. What makes us forgive a character? What makes us turn against one? When does trauma deepen a character? And when does it just become a convenient backstory? That's where the storytelling psychology comes into this curriculum. Part 5, learning from stories themselves. This might actually be my favorite part. We're not only learning from books about writing, we're going to study storytellers. So when we study suspense, I might bring in, for example, Edgar Allan Poe. That's all I can think about right now. And when we're studying theme, we can look at Mary Shelley. When we're studying mystery and misdirection, Agatha Christie is absolutely entering the classroom. I love researching writers. I love finding the strange, messy, and sometimes unbelievable stories behind their work. But here, I don't want their lives to be trivia. I want to ask, what can this writer teach us? What did they understand about storytelling? And can we still use it now? Now here's the part that matters. Because buying 7 or more books and arranging them on my desk aesthetically is not an education. Every book and every topic in this curriculum has 4 stages. The 4 stages are study, dissect, apply, reflect. First, study. I'll read that week's book, but I'm going into it with the question, not just what does this book say, something specific. For example, how does character desire create plot? Or what actually makes the reader feel the suspense? Because otherwise I can highlight the whole book and somehow remember absolutely nothing the following week. Then dissect. This is where we're going to look at stories, books, films, scenes, characters, sometimes famous examples, sometimes something I've recently read, and I want to see whether I can identify the principle at work. Because understanding a definition is one thing, recognizing it inside a story is a completely different thing. Then comes the third stage, which is apply. And this is the rule I'm giving myself the entire curriculum. Every lesson must touch my manuscript. Something has to change. A scene, a character, a chapter, a question I ask about the story, an outline. Maybe the lesson confirms that something is actually working and I just leave it alone. That counts too. But I can't finish a book having only collected information. I have to use it. And finally, the fourth and last stage is reflect. So I would ask things like, did it work? Did I misunderstand it? Did it make the story stronger? Did it feel generic? Would I use this technique again? Do I completely disagree with the person who wrote this book? Because that's allowed. Actually, I'm hoping that happens occasionally. I think it will be more interesting if we're not spending this entire series politely agreeing with every writing book ever published. I know I don't want to sit here every other Saturday and tell you, here are 5 ways to improve your character, and then send you away. I want to take the idea into an actual story and see what happens. I've been writing my novel for years, and when you work on something for that long, you change, which means the book changes with you. There are things that I love about my story, and there are things I know they're not working yet. There are parts that have probably become too close to see clearly. So my book is going to become the lab for this curriculum. Well, obviously I'm not putting the entire manuscript on YouTube. I would still quite like you to read it one day without knowing everything that happens. But I can show you the process. Some notes, character work, plotting, a problem I'm trying to solve, maybe portions of a scene where it makes sense, and most importantly, the before and after. So whatever we study, we're going to apply the 4 stages. challenges. There's one other thing that I want to make clear at the beginning of this series. I'm not doing this because I believe somewhere out there is the secret to writing the perfect novel. I don't think I'm gonna reach the last book on this table, close it, and then announce, fantastic, storytelling has been solved. Because it's not math. Two writers can be given the same principle and create completely different things with it. My perception is going to be different than yours when you read the same book. I want the craft knowledge without losing instinct or structure, without making every story feel engineered. And for technique, I don't want to write something that looks like it came from a checklist. The point of studying isn't about to replace taste. It's about sharpening it. I want to be able to feel something isn't working here and then have enough knowledge to know why, instead of staring at the chapter for 3 hours and then moving one comma, which has definitely never happened. Obviously, starting the curriculum. So this week, like I said, I'm going to start with Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. I'm going to take notes and then I'm going to bring what I learned into my own writing. I want to see what actually changes when I stop just reading about the craft and deliberately start applying it. And then in the next episode, I will show you exactly what happened. And tell me in the comments, what part of storytelling do you want to understand better? And if you want to follow the same exact curriculum as me and you don't want to miss an episode, then subscribe so you won't miss the next class. If you enjoyed this video, then give it a like. It genuinely helps the channel. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next class.